All right, it is time for a Tesla Mustang update. It has been several months since my last update. Sorry for everybody that's following along. But we've run into some hiccups, and these hiccups have just snowballed into me just not wanting to work on this thing. I'm going to be quite frankly honest. Yeah, you guys all watched the last one, so you know some of the hiccups that we ran across, and then I'll go into more depth on the next one. But we did get our axles back from the Dutchman Brothers. I'm gonna make sure I'm actually getting that right here real quick. Sure enough, Dutchman Brothers got them back, and these things are gorgeous. They did a fantastic job. New splines, got the spline covers on it. Here's the other one. That was the original spline. We didn't have to touch one side. The other side did have to. I'm actually starting to reassemble these right now. And it's pretty sad when you have to go back and watch your own YouTube video that you made and posted to make sure you're putting these things back together. I didn't want to put the wrong boot on the wrong end. These boots tend to roll around when they're just set on the floor, so I had them kind of backwards. Nonetheless, getting these things put back together now. I do still have to go and purchase the replacement rings, the boot rings for final reassemble, but getting close here. Figure I'll do a little walk around here. You can see lower cradle, still sitting here. Hasn't been touched. Still waiting on lower control arms, and that's the big headache we're going to talk about here in a second. But I'll give you a little walk around the car. I did want to give it a little bit of a review on some of these parts we put on here. A QA1 coilover, adjustable coilover kit. Awesome kit. My goodness, this thing was just gorgeous. Went in very well. Easily adjustable. Of course, when you start digging into this stuff, you realize that everything has to be replaced. I wasn't even really thinking about doing, all these other projects with the Mustang. I was just here to convert it to electric and send it back out the door. And as you can see, this is quite a bit more extensive of a project at this point. But as you go through, of course, ball joints are all bad. Hoses are all bad. Anything rubber in this car is just shot and gone. So we had to replace everything. So coilover kit, and the coilover comes with a single mount point on top, which is fantastic. I love that. Instead of having to go through and have several bolts up there. Great kit. Moving back a little bit, this one was not one of my finer moments. This is the CJ Pony part 4-piston caliper big brake kit for a V8 Mustang. And if you remember earlier in the project, this is a straight 6. This is an inline 6 Mustang. So the spindles are different. I found a company that's called the Ram Man. Actually going to come over here. I think I have his card. Don't mind my horribly messy workbench. I'm sure if you have a workbench, it looks just like mine does. Oh, actually, I put it over on my table. Nonetheless, I bought the spindle kit from the Ram Man to increase the size of the spindle. It's just a sleeve kit. Got that all installed, put together, piece of cake. But if I could give one piece of advice to anybody on this project, just go and buy V8 spindles. Don't try and convert 6-cylinder spindles over to V8 to fit a V8 big brake kit. What a waste of time this has been. Chasing parts, making sure I have everything. Just don't do it. Don't do it. Go find you a set of V8 spindles and freaking put them on. Just like the most random things from the kit wound up not working. So behind the dust cap, we have, of course, the castle nut. The castle nut on the inline 6 is a different size than the V8 because the spindle's smaller. What on top of that was it? The retainer washer underneath the castle nut is a different size. Trying to think what else. We had to do quite a bit of trimming on the dust shield to get the dust shield to fit with the 4-piston caliper, the big caliper kit. Yeah, the whole reason I went and wanted to keep the inline 6 is because you don't have to go and start changing all of your suspension. All of your steering components. But I think at this point, it would have been easier. Get the V8 spindles, get the V8 steering equipment, and just called it a day. I wound up having to just chase around parts way more than I should have, just because I made that decision to keep the original spindles. And again, there's nothing wrong with the spindles. They're great. Inline 6 are just fine. But to convert it to the V8 big brake kits, it just sucked. It was a nightmare. So that took quite a while. But now let's really get down to the problem and why it's been so long since an update. And I don't even have anything to show you. And that's the worst part. I wish I could sit here and be like, hey, let's show you the update and the part that I got. And, you know, we can all rejoice now. But we can't. I have nothing to show because these lower control arms that I tried to have fabricated, found a fabricator here in southern Utah, easily one of the best welder fabricators out there, and gave him my lower control arms. Handshake, said, like, see you later. You know, he works at an off-road company building custom suspensions, whatnot. And so this was going to be a walk in the park for him. Piece of cake. But I kept hounding him. Hey, have you got time? Have you got this done? And he wound up just starting to ghost me. No responses at all. And so I actually had to wind up going to his work and going and talking to his boss. I'm like, I'm sorry, this doesn't include you, but there's no other way I can get a hold of this guy. So talked to his boss, went and told him, I'm like, hey man, let's go right now. Let's go to your house and get my stuff. And he's like, well, just meet me here after work. We'll go. I went to go after work. I followed him home. He couldn't find him. He's like, oh, they must be back at the shop. Meet me there tomorrow morning. Went back the next morning. We couldn't find him. So at this point, he thought, well, one of our other fab guys might have thrown him away. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I no longer have lower control arms that came off of this cradle. And so I'm super bummed. I'm like, this has set me back 3 months already waiting on this guy and trying to get a hold of him. And now he doesn't even have the lower control arms. What a nightmare. And so I finally ordered new ones. He paid me for the lost items, gave me money for them. I ordered new ones, and I took him to a local fabricator here right in Cedar City. And he's making some progress. I will probably have them back in a week and a half. Once that's done, this whole entire subframe can get bolted into the car. It's that close. You know, I'm doing these CV axles right now, like I said. Everything else just bolts on, and it gets put back in the back of the car. Speaking of, one of the other hiccups that we came across, if you remember the frame rust, here we are. I'm actually going to turn my flash on. I think I have enough battery for flash. But here we are. New frame section welded in. Still need a little bit of more work on it. But that's welded in. We still have our mounting points for the cradle. Once the cradle's bolted in, we can actually reinforce everything. I don't want to burn these in completely and reinforce everything before we know exactly where that cradle's going to sit. So, a whole lot of just waiting around on these lower control arms. And ultimately, it's got me so down and out mentally that I don't even want to come out to the shop anymore. It took me about a month before I came out and just cleaned up. I had about a dozen other projects going on out here, just working on other things for the house. And I finally had to just buckle down and get back to it. And I'm sure that every single car guy that watches videos on YouTube knows what I'm talking about. You're going to have burnout. You're going to have things happen in your build that don't go to plan. And it just completely stalls the entire project. It just makes me sick, or made me sick, to even come out here and look at this thing. So I'm very excited to be back on track. Spent all weekend working on it out here. And we're going to get some stuff going again. So stay tuned. Hopefully a week and a half, I'll have that cradle in the car updated for you. In the meantime, batteries get racked this week. I'm taking the week off just to build the racking system, mount all the batteries in, get all the power wires run for the batteries so that when we get those lower control arms, this thing's going to be plug and play. Then we'll talk about battery monitoring in the next video. But we're getting close, everybody. Please follow along. It's been tons of fun. It's been a heck of a learning experience. So make sure to follow along.